Over 120 years ago, Nikola Tesla reported picking up extraterrestrial messages during his experiments with radio. Since then, many have come to believe that there has been an alien satellite in a near-polar orbit for hundreds of years. It has become known as the Black Knight satellite. But is this just a legend, cobbled together by conspiracy theorists from a jumble of unrelated stories? Or is there really an alien presence in our skies?
Aliens Explored is a weekly podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
Welcome back, listeners, to Aliens Explored, a weekly podcast where we discuss UFOs, aliens, and other otherworldly occurrences. I'm one of your hosts, Stu Jackson.
And I'm your other host, Neil Kelly.
Hello, Neil. How's it going?
Yeah, very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm good. How are you feeling after our last discussion on the crop circles?
Well, I'm thinking, I'm locked down in isolation at the moment, and I've been keeping this to-do list to do all the things I'm going to do once this whole thing's over. So I added to that list, and it's not a very long list. So this is number 8 on the list, which is visit a crop circle with Stu.
Fantastic. But no, it was really good to talk about those with you. But I was, when you threw down the gauntlet and said you were going to take me to task over it, I thought, ooh, that was a lot of fun. So do go back and listen to that, listeners, if you haven't yet. It is episode 11, where we go into, well, from my perspective, we only scratched the surface on crop circles. There's so much more that we could talk about. And do you know what? I think it'd be really good to revisit crop circles in a future episode.
Could be, or broadcast live from a crop circle.
Record do a live recording. Recorded live in front of a studio audience.
And see if the extraterrestrial forces mess with our equipment.
Electromagnetic disturbances do happen, so you never know what we might pick up. So stay tuned and watch that. But that's not what we're talking about today, is it?
It's not, no.
So this episode, we're talking about something that has plagued humanity, as some would have it, for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. I say plagued humanity. That's the wrong way of putting it. It's been there, people say, for a very long time. It's the Black Knight satellite. Sorry, I should say what we're actually talking about.
The Black Knight satellite, and the conspiracy theories around it.
Of which there are quite a few.
There are quite a few, and as you say, it's... I don't know how long ago they actually came up with this idea of a Black Knight satellite, but of course, having then posited that there is this alien satellite that's been in a near polar orbit for hundreds of years, people have been going back and finding all sorts of evidence for it in hundreds of years beforehand.
Well, it's called the Black Knight satellite because of its appearance on camera. There's there's a few photos of it. And yeah, it certainly, there's one particular famous photo that it really does look like a knight sat astride his charger, and it's black in colour, or very dark in colour at least.
Now, is that the one which members of the International Space Station said it was actually, effectively, it's a blanket. It's a thermal cover that they were fitting, and it got away from them and drifted off, and just the way things behave in space, this thing orbited for a little while before it burned up in the atmosphere. But they got this classic picture of it when it does look.
Yes, the very same one where the same crew reported it as an unknown object first. So that was quite an interesting. So yeah, the ISS crew say we can see something, we don't know what it is. It's very strange. They take photos, and then you get a bit of publicly radio silence, and then later on, I say, "Oh yeah, it was just a blanket."
Yes.
Right.
Well, it's saying this is Wikipedia saying Black Knight is a jumble of completely unrelated stories, reports of unusual science observations, authors promoting fringe ideas, classified spy satellites, and people overinterpreting photos. These ingredients have been chopped up, stirred together, and stewed on the internet to one rambling and inconsistent dollop of myth.
Wikipedia, well known for its impartiality, its unbiased views, and its scientific approach.
Well, is there an editorial stance with Wikipedia, or is it?
No, it's literally edited by the public.
Yeah. So
the public comes in. They do have certain rules, like you can't be offensive and things like that. And there are people that check it, but really, yeah, it's people's opinions. Yeah. Wikipedia.
But it goes on to say, as you suspect, that the legend is often retrospectively dated back to other sources, particularly Nikola Tesla's 1899 radio experiments, when he picked up these signals which he believed were extraterrestrial in origin.
That was very interesting. Yes, he was very open about it, very public about it, and the guy was pretty smart.
But there was an awful lot about radio signals in space and pulsars and things that just wasn't known about in those days.
Well, there was, but he wasn't saying, "Oh, I've picked up a radio signal and I don't know what it is." I mean, that happened a short while later in 1927, but with someone else. But with Tesla, no, he was saying, "I'm getting messages." He was saying, "I'm actually getting extraterrestrial messages."
Coherent, understandable messages.
Coherent, understandable. They were talking to him.
No, I haven't heard that. Is there any record of what they said?
Well, interestingly, I don't know if you're aware of this, with the end of Tesla's life, when he died, the government seized every book that he ever wrote in. They seized all his paperwork.
Was that the
US
government?
He died. Yes. And it's never been seen.
Well,
now some people say that's because he found ways of creating free energy with the Earth Energy Network, and of course that would damage the oil industry and it would cost people a lot of money. Some people say it's because he developed weapons of mass destruction, and they wanted to get their hands on that. But yeah, there are those that say, well, actually it's all to do with this, extraterrestrial communication that he was hearing, and they wanted to keep that under wraps. Or
could it have just been that his notebooks contain, because of who he was, his notebooks are worth taking away and studying to see what they can glean from them, and that the material in them isn't really worthy of publishing. because it's not, because of the disjointed form of it. It's not actually a thesis, but just his random notes on things and observations could be of use, or could be pointers.
If it was something as simple, as nice, as friendly as that, then I think there would be a very good reason for publishing it, which historical interest.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Tesla's a fascinating character who is studied by an awful lot of people. He's a very interesting person. I mean, he might have been a bit batshit crazy about some things, but
yeah, I'm just thinking about.
He was certainly an intelligent guy.
Yeah, he may have just produced reams and reams of random notes that were only understandable to him, really.
He might well have done, but I still think there's cause for putting that in the public domain. You know, it'd be a bestseller. You know, uncover the mystery around Tesla's work. Can you crack the code? You know, all that kind of, Dan Brown nonsense.
Could it also be, well, actually a lot of this stuff we don't understand, but we don't want it falling into someone else's hands, into a rival or an enemy who might well understand it and make some use out of it. A bit like the Catholic Church in Ireland banned Ulysses by James Joyce. They couldn't understand it, so they thought, well, if we can't, we better just ban it just in case.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Oh yes, yeah.
Okay, I'm aware of similar things. We can't make head or tail of it,
but yeah, maybe someone can, and maybe they'll get some sort of sinful pleasure from it.
I'm aware of similar things from the church, like them wanting to ban Life of Brian, clearly because they didn't understand that either.
Well. No, I saw a picture of an Irish bookshop in Dublin with a big sign in the window saying, there are over 10,000 books that are banned in Ireland. If you see one in the shop, please let us know and we'll remove it.
Fantastic. Okay. I mean, but that's the Tesla connection, and people have posited the theory that what he was actually receiving signals from was this Black Knight satellite. But a couple of decades later, like I say, 1927, so what, 30, 40 years later nearly, a guy called Jürgen Holz picked up radio signals on his radio equipment that were very clearly artificial in origin. And of course, this was before anybody had put any satellites up or anything like that.
Artificial satellites, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of wonder where that came from.
Well, it has also been posited that these signals might have been terrestrial in origin.
Well, didn't he locate that it was coming from extraplanetary origin?
Well, some have posited that he didn't, that it might have been bouncing off something or bouncing off the atmosphere or whatever a radio signal can do. And that, yeah, it seemed to be coming down from above, but...
Okay. I mean, there was someone who later on, and I'm going forward sort of, again, decades now, who managed, they believed, to translate those signals into a coherent message. Let's see if I can...
Yeah, there was a story about Arthur C. Clarke, who was a radio operator during the Second World War, and bored on shift, night after night, he tried bouncing a signal off the moon. He thought maybe we could get it. We can get a radio signal across to the other side of the planet by bouncing it off something in orbit, and the only thing, of course, in our orbit was the moon at that time. So he did it successfully, but realised that the moon was too far away for it to be really practical. And so effectively, he conceived, although didn't some people say invent, but he conceived the communication satellite.
Right. Okay. Still seeing if I can find this translation. Sorry, bear with me.
I mean, it's also hard to imagine that there could be something in our orbit that we can't track. I mean, because our orbit is a fairly busy place, isn't it?
I think that's part of the problem. There is people are scared of what they don't understand. It's a terrifying idea that something is up there watching us. I mean, some people take great comfort in the idea, of course.
Well, your government is up there watching you.
Well, there is that.
One thing,
but they're a known entity. They're not inscrutable. They're not all powerful by comparison. So yeah, that's a thing. Anyway, I can't find it on the translation by looking quickly. So, so listeners, if you do find it out there, do send us a link to the translation. It'd be great to see it.
And now, while I was researching this, I came across something called the Fermi paradox, and it was a paradox. With it was almost an offhand remark by an Italian physicist, Enrico Fermi, who was most famous for creating the world's first nuclear reactor. So it was a casual lunchtime remark in 1950, but it's had researchers wondering about it ever since. And really, he asked, if there are extraterrestrials, then where are they? It said Fermi realised that any civilization with a modest amount of rocket technology and an immodest amount of imperial incentive could rapidly colonise the entire galaxy. Well, where are they? And that was a quote from the SETI Institute, the Search for Extra-Terrestrial Intelligence, and that is another aspect, isn't it? There are people all around the planet with their computers set to just looking for what would seem to be an intelligent radio signal.
Okay, but so I always feel like the urge to roll my eyes a little bit, I'm afraid, when I hear this theory postulated in various different forms. I hear it. So we're applying human thinking, human motivations, human morality, humanity to this otherworldly entity. They could have motivations, they could have ways of doing things, they could have perceptions that are utterly, utterly beyond our comprehension.
And I guess that is the thing in so much science fiction, whether you're watching Doctor Who or Star Wars or whatever, the bad guys just behave like our corporations, really.
Well, yeah, they're anthropomorphized, whatever that word is. They're basically, yeah, you watch Star Wars, Star Trek, and what you are looking at is humans that look slightly different. They're not truly alien. I think, if you want to see examples of that, well, the film Alien, the subsequent sequels started describing terrestrial characteristics. Oh, it's like bees in a hive, and there's drones, and there's a queen, but the very first Alien film, you had no clue as to the motivation of the creature. You had no clue as to what it would become, how it would evolve, how it would change, how to deal with it, how to communicate. It was utterly inscrutable. And that, I think, is probably more representative of extraterrestrial or otherworldly life. I'm not saying they've, got acid for blood or anything like that. But it's just you're trying to. How do you communicate with a squid? Or a jellyfish? Jellyfish can communicate to each other. Why can't we communicate with them? Because we're utterly alien from each other.
Yeah, and it's not the fact that it's not just whether we can communicate, it's what we would be communicating, what information is of interest or relevance to them.
Absolutely. But even then, let's say they are an advanced enough civilization, let's say that they've taken on human characteristics, that humanity is a universal trait in sentient life. Let's say that's the case, and they have evolved to the point that they can travel these immense distances. They've got this amazing technology. They are thousands upon thousands of years ahead of us in terms of evolution, in terms of technology. So it's a bit like us maybe going back and studying Cro-Magnon man. And we might watch him and we might study it and see how he behaves and learn a bit about ourselves and learn a bit about our past. And he's there wondering, why are they just sat there watching me? Why aren't they coming and talking to me? Well, we're not doing that because we don't want to interfere. Plus, and we'd also, if we talk to him, what we're going to do? Give him guns?
And we also assume a kind of unity of purpose with aliens. But we know that if we were able to travel back and observe Cro-Magnon man, that it might start off with scientists going back to want to just study him, but then there might be corporations saying, oh, wait a minute, there's a whole load of stuff there that we want, and Cro-Magnon man is in our way. Let's just wipe him out and take the oil or whatever it is that we see of value.
Well, that's it. But really, the whole. So, if there's aliens, where are they? Why aren't they talking to us? It just you're not thinking alien. You're not thinking. Another good movie to illustrate that is Abyss. The Abyss. Where you're talking about, well, we don't know if they're aliens, we don't know if they're, Earth creatures, but you're talking about sentient life that is almost impossible to understand or comprehend. And I think that those films like that are a closer reflection to what we would actually encounter. But anyway, that's getting off track somewhat. So back onto the Black Knight satellite. So we've talked about a couple of experiences that people have connected with it. We talked about the International Space Station. We talked about Tesla. We talked about Jürgen Holz. What about the US Navy?
The US Navy.
Did you come across that in your
no, 1960? I didn't.
Okay, so
certainly, we are facing something. We're facing now is the militarization of space. It was a concern that came up in the Reagan era, 35, 40 years ago, when he started talking about the Star Wars, the strategic defense initiative, militarization of space, and of course now we have Donald Trump talking about Space Force and a permanent manned presence on the moon.
Yes.
So it's hard to imagine that we seem to be able to go into orbit so routinely that there's something up there that we can't track. And of course that leads to conspiracy theories that our government know all about the Black Knight satellite and are hiding it from us.
Well, we'll come on to the more recent stuff in a moment, because that actually does play into some quite interesting theories about what has happened there. But coming back to this US Navy thing in 1960, so what happened, the Navy actually detected what they described as a dark, tumbling object in space.
a satellite in orbit. They believed it to be... it was someone slightly later who discovered its orbit, but that's a slightly different thing. But yeah, they discovered this, they announced it, then later, so 30 years later on the disclosure of documents, they claimed it was one of their own spy satellites that they'd seen.
I did read, the remains of an Air Force Discoverer 8 satellite that had gone astray. And that would be quite typical, that the Air Force and the Navy would not be working together. If I know about inter-service rivalry, they really would.
Okay, but it would also be a really convenient way of covering it up.
It would. I mean, the US Navy at first thought the dark object to be a Soviet spy satellite in orbit. I mean, the Russians had put up the Sputnik 3 years previously.
Well, at first they didn't know what it was. Then, it was postulated that it might be Russian. Then they claim it was American. It all seems a bit convenient. But just 1 year after that discovery, in France, Jacques Vallée discovered an object orbiting the Earth. Now, this was an interesting one because this object was orbiting the Earth in the opposite direction to its rotation. There's a name for it. And I've forgotten what the name is. But it's this moving contrary to the direction that the Earth is moving. Now, at that time, we did not have the technology to do that. We can now, but at that time, we didn't have the technology to actually do it.
I thought they could go in any direction, including polar to polar. Over the top. I thought, the main reason for going in the same direction as the Earth is rotating was to maintain a geostationary orbit, to keep your satellite over the same spot. For instance, if it's a TV satellite, you don't want it moving, you want it on a fixed point.
Well, it's only geostationary if it moves at the same speed as the orbit.
That's right. I mean, so if it's
if it's a bit slower, but using the orbit to help move it, then it's going to effectively look like it's moving backwards in the sky. Yeah. If it's a bit quicker, then it looks like it's moving forwards. But but
if it's going in totally the other direction, then it will look like it's going really fast.
It would, but in 1961 we did not have the technology to do that. Yet Jacques Vallée discovered an object doing exactly that. Now, he recorded it on tapes. His tapes were confiscated by his boss and erased. Why?
That's a good question.
Why? What if there's nothing to it? If it's just something innocent? Yeah. So that's one to consider. But even before, so we've talked about the orbit, but even before we had the ability to launch satellites ourselves, a Dr. Lepaz reported a satellite in 1954. So that was before Sputnik and the Russians, and that was before anybody. So he discovered. So, and then you're on to the more modern stuff. So the one that stands out in my mind was Gordon Cooper. Are you familiar with his story?
He's the astronaut who reported a UFO sighting during his 15th orbit in Mercury 9. And that was confirmed by tracking stations, but there's no evidence that this happened.
It might have been Mercury 7, I thought.
Okay.
But it was definitely one of the Mercuries, but just to be... Yeah, that's definitely... We're talking about the same guy. Corroborated by a huge number of amateurs with radio telescopes at the time. his UFO. And he knew what he was doing. He would have known what he was looking at.
Neither NASA's mission transcripts nor Cooper's personal copies show any such report being made during the orbit.
Yep. So what do we make of that?
So when he supposedly reported, people say he supposedly reported it, was that because it was overheard by other people?
It was overheard by other people. The UFO was seen on radio telescopes by a huge number of amateur radio telescope enthusiasts as he was talking about it.
So in 1963, when humankind has just started putting satellites in orbit, but probably doesn't have the technology to really realise when they're doing it. You know, if Russians are launching rockets from Space City in Kazakhstan, America won't always know. We didn't have that kind of coverage in 1963. And vice versa. That, the Soviets would rely on having spies in Florida or in the Caribbean to watch American. That's how they would know a launch had happened. It's probably much harder for American spies to report back from Kazakhstan, it being a closed society.
Okay, well let's summarise our thoughts on the Black Knight satellite then. So we've talked about quite a lot of the theories surrounding it. What do you think then? Is there something to it, or is it all plausible?
I think it's a mixture of things. I mean, clearly, the story with the thermal blanket being lost, that was something that people saw and said, "Oh, look there, that looks like the Black Knight." But there have been other sightings that obviously weren't that, but could have also had a terrestrial origin. So I think what's being put together is a mix of things, and some of them could be extraterrestrial. There's quite a fair few of them that haven't been explained in any way, or there's clear evidence that they've been covered up, that all record of them has been destroyed. So it's a mystery, isn't it?
And do you know what I think? This is probably a first. We're 12 episodes in on this show now, and I think this is the first time this has happened. I think we're pretty much in complete agreement here. A lot of things have been ascribed to the Black Knight satellite that have come from different sources that have different causes. I don't believe I will dispute you on the thermal blanket thing. I think they said that as a cover-up. I think that was something otherworldly that they saw.
Okay.
But, yeah.
I'd also be interested to see how a blanket would behave in something soft, I assume it's fairly soft, but even it's a thermal blanket for a space station. But I imagine it doesn't have much rigidity to it. How
aren't the
that
thermal
would behave
blankets
in space? Because
aren't they the metallic ones, the thermal blankets?
Well, if you think like something like
tinfoil,
like a space blanket, but even that, I mean, you know what it looks like if it's being blown around by the wind, but that's not what it would look like in space.
No,
and it might be able to just whatever shape it happened to have been in when it left to just retain that shape, because there are no forces acting to change it.
That's it.
There's no gravity. There's no wind. There's no friction.
Indeed. But I think you're talking about a conflation of lots of different events, some of which are rational, some which, as you rightly said, defy explanation at this time. So there we are, folks. What do you think? Is there something about the Black Knight satellite that we have missed? Is there something that we've overlooked? Is there a smoking gun hidden amongst it all? Or do you agree with us? Do you think it's a conflation of lots of different things. Do tweet us or message us and let us know your thoughts. And don't forget to join us next time when we are Utah bound for the Sherman Ranch, otherwise known as the Skinwalker Ranch. Until then, take care and watch those skies. Bye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Aliens Explored is a Figo Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter and Facebook by searching Aliens Explored or visit aliensexplored.com.